Indiana.
When I was growing up, the number one killer in the United States was pneumonia. My mother worked in my mother was a nurse. She worked in the ICU sometimes. She worked in emergency room. People would come in and die of pneumonia. Mother of the shooter in Florida, his mother died of pneumonia. As odd as that seems. Now, it really is odd since we have all kinds of antibiotics now to battle pneumonia, but at one time it was the number one killer. It's not anymore. It's cardiovascular disease. It's the number one killer in the United States. But once upon a time, polio killed people, smallpox killed people. I was born in 1949, and we had a polio epidemic that hit in the early 1950s. One of the people in my class had polio, and one leg was shorter than the other. Some people who got polio would get it in their lungs, and then they couldn't breathe. It atrophied your muscles, is what polio did. Now, of course, we've almost eradicated it. Not quite, but almost. So once upon a time, polio killed people. Smallpox, of course, killed people. When the Europeans first came to the Americas, one of the great killers was smallpox. Killed off just millions and millions, tens of millions of people. Tetanus, of course, lockjaw, diphtheria, which is a form of pneumonia. It's a respiratory illness, and then rheumatic fever, of course.
What is lockjaw?
What's lockjaw? Lockjaw is caused by bacteria that you find on old metal. It's a bacteria that will paralyze the muscles in your sometimes it can be your chest, but usually it's your neck. So it paralyzes those muscles, so you jump up and you run. And that's why they call it lockjaw. And of course they can't breathe, they can't eat. And eventually they die. That's tetanus. Diphtheria, of course, is a respiratory illness. Rheumatic fever is a disease caused by big strep group A. So you can get scarlatina, you can get scarlet fever. These are all caused by the same bacteria. But rheumatic fever is where the bacteria, the baby strep group A, invades the heart muscle, and it weakens the heart muscle. And it kills a lot of people. Well, it used to kill a lot of people, not so much anymore, because we treat strep throat. In the old days, if you had a sore throat, you had a sore throat, and we just let it glide, and there was nothing we could do about it. We didn't have any antibiotics at that time, so we couldn't really treat it. And then right around World War I, they invented penicillin, or World War II, I'm sorry. Right after World War I, they invented penicillin, or discovered it, I don't know. Anyway, they started treating strep. They actually started treating just about any illness you had. They treated it with penicillin. So we were all getting overdosed with penicillin. It wasn't killing anybody, but it made the bacteria more likely to mutate, and therefore they were no longer sensitive to penicillin. Anyway, okay, so today none of these things we don't worry about any of these things. We used to inoculate everybody against smallpox. If you were inoculated against smallpox, it means that you were born sometime between the year 1969 and 1972. My daughter was born in 69, and she has a smallpox vaccination on her back. And my son was born in 1972. He didn't get one, and he didn't need one because they had eradicated it by that time. I've had 3 smallpox vaccinations. Had one when I was a kid, got one when I went off to college and the military, inoculated me against smallpox. And you guys probably have no clue what I'm talking about. But if I'm ever over at the gym if I'm ever lifting over at the gym when you're over there, I'll show you my smallpox scar. I've got a vaccination scar on my shoulder, which is interesting. Community barriers. People are more likely to adopt health-enhancing behaviors when they're promoted by community organizations. Some environments promote health compromising behaviors. If you live in some neighborhoods, alcohol and binge drinking is very common in those neighborhoods. This happens, of course, among college students. College students are probably the heaviest drinkers of all the people. It's usually the younger years. It's the freshman, sophomore years. Juniors and seniors, not so much. If they made it into their junior and senior year, usually they slow down their drinking. They're not drinking nearly as heavily because you really can't maintain a good grade point average and be drunk every night. It just doesn't work that way. Anyway, so those individuals tend to drink relatively heavily. Health system barriers. Medicine tends to focus on treatment rather than prevention. Usually we talk about early warning signs, but most people just ignore them. Like I said, I worked in medicine for 30 years, then I had a heart attack, and I had the heart attack for about 4 days before I did anything about it. Even though I knew what the early signs were. I assumed it was something else. I wanted it to be something else, so I was in denial. Economic forces undermine the efforts of healthcare workers to promote preventive measures. In 2010, 49 million Americans did not have healthcare insurance, did not have health insurance. This is before they passed the Affordable Care Act. So in 2010, this is before the Affordable Care Act was passed, 49 million Americans did not have health care. In 2016, despite the Republican attempt to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, the figure of uninsured in the United States had gone down to 28 million people. But of course, I was listening to what Trump was saying this weekend, and he attacked, he was at the CPAC, the conservative, whatever that thing is. So anyway, he was at CPAC and he complained about John McCain giving his thumbs down on doing away with the Affordable Care Act. Still pissed off about that as far as that goes. But of course, we still have 28 million Americans who are not insured. So who are these guys? Most of these individuals are high-risk family characteristics, are high-risk families. They have bad habits. There's a lot of conflict in the families. There tends to be deficient nurturing taking place, a lot of soda drinking, a lot of snack eating. Many health habits are acquired from their parents and other relatives, of course, so the children just acquire the parents' habits. If the parents smoke, the child is more likely to smoke. If the parents are obese, the child is more likely to be obese and have similar eating patterns to their parents. If their parents are problem drinkers, the children are more likely to abuse alcohol. Injury is the leading cause of death among people between ages 1 and 44. The use of the term injury and trauma have replaced accident. We don't use the term accidents anymore. 3 accepted strategies for injury prevention programs: education and behavioral change. We can deal with it at the individual level so that we can change their behavior and maybe educate them. We can legislate and enforce, and this is really what we're talking about when we're talking about gun control. It would be nice if we could if we could educate and change the behavior of people with weapons so that we wouldn't see these mass shootings anymore. But that's really not possible. It's got to start someplace else. So it looks like legislation and enforcement is where it's going to be. Actually, the gun manufacturers could change everything if they would just change the way they put the guns together. They put safety locks on the guns. I don't know if that would work or not, but they could put safety locks on the guns. They could change the technology. I was reading this weekend that even if Congress doesn't do anything about gun control, that potentially banks can refuse to purchase guns if you try to purchase it with a credit card. Should be interesting. I mean, this is going to be fascinating if we start getting this stuff legislated by the banking community. There's already companies that are dumping the NRA. I didn't realize that all these people gave the NRA, I mean, the two airlines would give them discount rates on all the flights. I know, it's not that seem fair at all. I'm a psychologist and a college professor, they don't do anything for my flights, damn it. Did I say damn it? That's what I meant too, damn it. Anyway, so all of these things are ways of changing the way that we do things. 80% of the people who are uninsured are from working families. The problem isn't that people don't have jobs. The problem is that the jobs don't offer health care. And there's a lot of them out there. Both of my children used to work in the service industry. My son was a chef and then he was a bartender, and my daughter was a waitress. And neither one of them got any life insurance, or not life insurance, but health insurance. Only 27% come from families with incomes below the poverty level. So the reality is that their families are relatively not well-to-do, but they're middle class or lower middle class. So it's not like they're living in poverty. That's not the problem. The problem is that they have jobs that do not offer health care. Single adults are at high risk, of course, because they're more likely to take these jobs. 45% cite the high cost of insurance as the main reason. And as you can see, I just looked this thing up over lunch, and this is from 2016. This is from Kaiser Permanente. 45% say it's just too expensive to buy healthcare insurance. So what do you do if you don't have any health insurance? You guys don't have to worry about it because you've got IHS. You can always go to IHS even if IHS is crappy. It's the worst healthcare in the world. Is it? It's the same as the military, so stop whining. It's as good as the military gets, unfortunately. So unfortunately, the military gets fairly bad health care. But what about those other guys? I mean, so why in the world do American Indians get health care, and why don't Hispanics get health care? Why don't African Americans get health care? Why don't Lithuanians get health care? Why do you guys get health care and nobody else gets health care? I don't get health care. Well, I do because I was in the military. And my wife retired from the military. So why do you guys get it and nobody else gets it?
Because it's part of the treaty.
That is, it's part of the treaty. That's exactly it. Since they stole everything else from all the land, I guess they think we can give you health care. And education. Education is another part of most of the treaties. Sometimes it was cash. It was cash. People got cash, but most of that has run out by this time. The grow bond. Is it just the grow bond or the closing kids? No, it was both of them. When you turned 18 up on the Fort Belknap Reservation, they gave you $10,000. That was part of the treaty that they signed in 1851. They gave you $10,000. So guess what most people did with their $10,000 at 18? What do you want at 18? What does everybody want at 18? A good education, so they saved it to go to college and all. What do they do? I'm sorry?
They spent on anything and everything.
Well, no, they spent it on one thing specifically. Exactly, the water car. The water car, and then they wrecked it like within weeks. Or they let a cousin borrow it, and the cousin wrecked it. And then they complained about it for the next 10 years. I heard those stories over and over and over. At least nobody died. Usually nobody died. But yeah, they bought cars. The group that is most likely to be uninsured are people between the age of 19 and 34. So it's college kids. One provision in the ACA is that the individual can stay insured on their parents' program until the age of 26. So that's not too bad. They can stay on the parents' program. This came up. Oh, this came up because I had a student at Ashford who's trying to get into graduate school. He wants to study IO psychology. And he had all these offers. He lives in Bangladesh. I'm sorry, did I say Bangladesh? I meant Bangladesh. He lives in Bangladesh. Anyway, he got an offer from one of the schools for a scholarship. It was a full ride, but he had to pay his own health insurance. And he was complaining about it, okay? Because the health insurance was going to be, I don't know, $498 every quarter or something like that. And he was going, oh, I cannot survive on $498. Or if I have to pay $498. So he got another scholarship, and now he's happy. So he's headed to Wright State. Nice kid, smart kid. The majority of the uninsured come from working families. Uninsured workers are more likely to have low wage or blue collar jobs and to work for small firms or in the service industry. And of course, that's what all the business owners were complaining about. ACA, oh my God, they made us give health insurance to all of our workers. And of course, Donald Trump was appalled by this since he is kind of a cheap bastard. I said Donald Trump's a cheap bastard. I'm glad you weren't here. Since he's kind of cheap, that's one of the reasons why he's trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. Of course, he's a business owner and there's businesses all over the place. And he certainly doesn't he wants to pay as little as he possibly can. He wants to pay as little as he possibly can get away with. Anyway, that's a business owner for you. What's wrong with those people? Business people. 30.1% of the uninsured individuals are Hispanic, 19.5% of the uninsured individuals are African American, 16.1% of the uninsured individuals are Asian, and 10.1% of the uninsured are European American. So we took a picture of the average uninsured individual. What would they look like? Would they be Hispanic? Would they be African American? Would they be Asian? Or would they be white? Statistics. What color would they be? Hispanic? They're going to be Hispanic because 30.1% of the uninsured. What's the percentage of people in the United States that are Hispanic? 50% now, 60%?
Still going to be white people?
We still have 70% of the people in the United States are still white. So even with this figure, we still have more white people that are uninsured than we do other individuals. But when the people argue about people that are uninsured, what do they paint these people as? Do they paint them as white people or white people from Chicago? No. They paint them as Hispanics from Chicago, or Hispanics from California, or illegal immigrants, or something else. They're trying to fool us, but we're not fooled because we understand statistics. So most of these individuals are still white. The state with the most insured people is Massachusetts. If you know anything about Obamacare, or if you were part of this whole thing when Obamacare was, or the Affordable Care Act was passed, it's actually not his. He's not the one who came up with it. Mitt Romney came up with it. It was Mitt Romney's plan from Massachusetts, and then of course when Mitt was running against Obama, of course, he's trying to run against Obamacare, but it was actually Romney-Care in Massachusetts, which was kind of funny. Or not that funny. It wasn't that funny. Anyway, it was Massachusetts has the most insured people in the United States. Texas, strangely or not strangely enough, has the most uninsured people, 27%. When we think of Texans, what race do we think of them as? Who are these people? Who are Texans? Cowboys? White people? Are most of the people in Texas white? Really? Look it up. I think they're Hispanic. I think there are more Hispanics in Texas than there are white people. Look it up. Look it up. Yeah, I may be wrong. It's possible, I could be wrong. Look it up, I think most of the people in Texas are Hispanic. The largest percentage of people in Texas are Hispanic. There's more Hispanic Texans than there are European Americans. Hispanics are so confusing, aren't they? I mean, they're kind of native and Spanish or European. This is too confusing for me. You get anything? Look up the census. What do you call it? Quick facts. That's what we call it. Quick facts. And then I can do it. What am I telling you guys to do it for? I can do it. My goodness. Somebody's lazy here. Let's see. Quick facts. Census Bureau quick facts, United States. That's what we want. Let's see. Come on. There we go. We want race of Hispanic origin. We want Texas. Where is selected fact? Yeah, fine. So where's Texas? Where's the map?
It says white alone percentage July 1st, 2016.
76.9. That's in the United
79.
States. That's in the United States. But I want interstate or county. Okay, how about Texas?
I put Texas in.
Oh, you got it? Yeah. Oh, there's Texas. All right. If I clear it, what do I get? I get nothing. Okay, Texas. Have you already done this? You know what's going on? You've already got the figures, right?
It says Texas white alone 79.4%.
79% people in Texas. Wait a minute. That's not total. That's the United States. Texas. There we go. Okay. Well, shoot, that was the wrong place to put it, wasn't it? Oh, you got it. What do you have? Since I can't figure it out. In the old days, you just said, okay, on that. You got it. Okay, that's it. Oh, 79. That's so I was completely off. 39. Hispanic or Latino. 39. White alone, not Hispanic or Latino. Oh, there it is. White alone, not Hispanic. Okay, so it's 42 to 39. So whites still dominate in Texas. I apologize. I must be reading the wrong piece of information. So 42% of the population is white and 39% are Hispanic, according to that, to the Census Bureau. And we're certainly not going to argue with the Census Bureau. Okay, I stand corrected. Thank you. Some areas of the country encourage their citizens to exercise. The healthiest state in the Union has been Colorado forever, for the longest period of time. Austin, Texas has built neighborhoods around green energy and open areas to exercise. A lot of people exercise in Colorado. Now that the marijuana boom seems to be hitting Colorado, we'll see how healthy they are in the upcoming years. Sleep may be the elixir of health. 1 in 5 adults experiences sleep deprivation that may be caused by sleep disorders, either insomnia, narcolepsy, sleepwalking, sleep apnea, or stress, or a demanding work-study schedule where you have to stay up and you do all these horrible things at night rather than sleeping. Sleep debt promotes increased body weight.
It suppresses your immune function, which makes you sick. You need to be careful. The effects can mimic accelerated aging, so that is a problem. That can potentially be a problem, of course. Studies have shown that teenagers are not getting enough sleep. A school district in Minnesota moved their start time till later in the morning to give their students more of a chance to sleep in. And of course this worked, it seemed to work. They started eating breakfast instead of skipping breakfast. It improved the attendance. There was less tardiness in the school. There was a greater alertness in class. Calmer school atmosphere, fewer disciplinary and counseling referrals. Now both of my kids used to teach in Florida, and guess what they just did with their start times? Guess what they did in Florida with their start times? Did they bring the kids in earlier? Did they bring them in later? I mean, according to the study in Minnesota, it's better to come in later. So is that what they did in Florida? Evidently not, otherwise I wouldn't be bringing it up. No, they started bringing them in earlier. And now we've had that horrible shooting down in West Miami, North Miami, wherever it is. Just south of Fort Lauderdale. It's one of the reasons my daughter left Florida. She was teaching, she'd been down there for 17 years. Is that right? Yeah, 17 years, poor thing. She left because nothing they were doing was making any sense. The other problem that they were having was they were pushing toward private education and school vouchers for parochial schools, for Christian schools. And she was teaching in public schools, and they kept, instead of giving her a raise, they just kind of held it steady. She hadn't had a raise in 10 years. And here they were starting to give school vouchers to the parochial schools. Anyway, she got upset. She left. And it caused all kinds of interesting problems. And that may have something to do with it. Potentially it has something to do with it. One of the outcomes from the study in Minnesota was calmer school atmosphere. So they started making the kids come in earlier. And they actually made the teachers come in earlier. My son has to get up at 4:30 in order to get ready for school so that he can be there by 6:30, standing in the hallway when the kids come in at 7 o'clock. So they have to be there at 6:30. And if they have a meeting, they don't have a meeting after school, they have a meeting before school. So they have a meeting at 6 o'clock in the morning. Isn't that stupid? I don't even get up at 6 o'clock in the morning. Okay, I get up at 6:30. Health education is any planned intervention involving communication that promotes the learning of healthier behavior. Precede, proceed model identifies specific health problems in a community. It identifies lifestyle and environment elements that contribute to the targeted behavior. So if we're talking about the reservation, how could we identify the lifestyle and the environment? Of course, I ask you these questions on some of your posts, and you get some fairly interesting answers. How about alcohol on the reservation? Is there any alcohol on the reservation? I thought it was alcohol. How could there be any alcohol on the reservation? There's not? Thank you, Alexander. That's what I was thinking too. So there's no alcohol on the reservation, but there is alcohol on the reservation, right? And where does it come from? I'm sorry? Where did they get it? They're not supposed to bring it on the res. So how many is it getting? Do they make it themselves? Water towns are bringing it from Gallup? That's a good place. Gallup's a fun place. I was just there on Friday. Okay, so that's the life. So the lifestyle is you go to Gallup and bring back cases of booze. Is that the way it works? Is that how it works? So how do they keep from getting caught? I've seen one policeman in 2 years on that road between here and Gallup. One policeman.
when I was up there were 3 policemen that one day, but that's it. I mean, the rest of the time, I never see anybody, and if they're there, I don't know, I'm going pretty damn fast, and I hope they would stop me, but I guess they're not. Anyway, so the lifestyle is kind of negative, and the environment. So does that lead to a lot of alcoholism on the reservation? Is there a lot of alcoholism here as compared to other places? Wow, as compared to other places. Do you think there's more drinking here than there is on the Apache reservation? Icaria? White Mountain? San Carlos? What do you think? No kidding? Nobody knows anything about the Apache. I'm gonna try it. What about up north? We know about it. What's an alcoholism rate up there?
I think here there's more people drinking, like in front of stores or ashes.
Yeah.
And if you go there, like Albertsons, you don't see nobody like that. But
It's because they're in their houses.
it's because it's legal.
Exactly. So is the alcoholism rate higher up north?
In my opinion, I don't
Yeah.
think drugs is high.
Well, it is. Yeah, northern plains, it's like,
Yeah.
that's a lot.
It's an epidemic.
Yeah, it's pretty high. Anyway, okay, well, I'll start picking up. Analyzes, what are we doing? Precede, proceed model. It analyzes background factors that predispose, enable, and reinforce these lifestyles and environmental factors. And of course, we're talking about drugs and alcohol. So this is one of the ways that we can stop this is by trying to figure out why this is happening. The precede, proceed model implements a well-designed health education program, and that's the precede, proceed model. Unfortunately, they don't really have much of an example. Campaigns that merely inform people of the hazards of certain behaviors, for example, the anti-smoking messages, are typically ineffective. Multifaceted campaigns that present information on several fronts are generally more effective than single-shot campaigns. And of course, so would this be more effective or would that be more effective? If we talk about your billfold, is that going to be more effective, or talking about how you're going to kill yourself in 30 or 40 years? Yeah, the money probably. Yeah, each one's $1, really? Well, kinda. Wait a minute. If it costs, what, $5 or $6 for a pack of cigarettes, and there's 20 of them.
It's like $7 now.
It's $7? Oh my goodness gracious. Wow, it is almost $1 a piece. I hope you really like cigarettes. Wow, that's a lot of money. Yeah. This really doesn't convince people. How far down the road are you going to be dying? Well, when you're in your 60s, you didn't think you'd make it past your 40s anyway. An important factor in health education is the wording used or the framing of the message. Gain-framed message focuses on attaining positive outcomes or avoiding undesirable ones by adopting a health-promoting behavior. If you exercise frequently, you'll look and feel better. That's a gain-framed message. You'll look better, you'll feel better. If you exercise regularly, you're less likely to be obese or suffer from chronic diseases. That's another gain-framed message. Loss-framed messages focus on negative outcomes from failing to perform a health-promoting behavior. If you don't exercise, you will be more susceptible to debilitating diseases. If you don't exercise, you won't have the extra energy that exercising provides. So we need to figure out who we're talking to, and we need to tailor our messages. We need to customize them to the individual characteristics of the people that we're giving those messages to. So if you watch TNT, you watch USA, those are channels for people that don't have cable television. They do have cable television, but they don't have the movie channels. So a lot of the messages, especially at night, early in the morning, during the day, have to do with depends, strange things about adult diapers and odd things like that. They are focusing their advertising on who's watching the television at those times, especially old television shows. Murder, She Wrote. My wife is a
Murder, She Wrote addict for some reason. And of course, she gets to see all of these advertisements for Depends and for erectile dysfunction medications and all kinds of interesting problems. And I think, personally, I would just watch the movie channels, but I think that it's convincing my wife that she's old. She is old. I mean, she's 65. That's old enough. 66. And that's old enough, but I think she thinks that she's old. And I don't watch that crap, so I don't feel old at all. I feel like I can do just about anything. It's television. It just drives me crazy. Anyway, and I'm a psychologist, so I understand what they're trying to tell me. Are they trying to tell me to die? Or are they just telling her to die? Should we die? Should I be dead? I know they keep trying to kill me off, but it ain't working yet. A loss-framed fear message is a health message that focuses on the negative outcomes from failing to perform a health-promoting behavior. Scare tactics that arouse fear may backfire and decrease a person's likelihood of changing his or her beliefs and behavior. So you have to be careful. You don't want to scare people. A key factor in determining the effectiveness of threatening health messages is the recipient's perceived self-efficacy regarding the behavior. How do you feel about this behavior? Are you really positive about it, or are you really negative about it? Do you think you can defeat that everybody else is going to die from smoking cigarettes, but you're the one that's not going to, and you can smoke up until you're 90 years old? Is that the way you feel? So it all depends on your self-efficacy. These individuals you're not going to touch anyway. Loss-frame fear appeals are more effective in promoting illness detection behaviors. I've got a really ugly advertisement. This ran up in Montana for a couple of years. They had a horrible crystal meth problem when I first got up there. It was bad. It was really bad. I had students that looked like skeletons in my classes. Eventually, it went away for a couple different reasons. One, the people that were really bad died, as sad as that is. And the other individuals tried to stay away. And they did stay away. They stayed away from the drugs. And these are some of the advertisements that got them to stay away. One of the things that happened was there was a billionaire that lived in Kalispell, and his daughter died of an overdose from crystal meth. And he swore that he would stop it from happening again. So he started this campaign. You could drive any place you drove, any place in Montana, there was advertisement. Painted them on old barns. They put wrecked cars, and they said, "This is what your life's going to be like if you use crystal meth just once. Don't even use it one time." That was the message. And so some of these are pretty stark. And I apologize for that. Some of them have to do with sex. I apologize for that as well. But this was the advertisement campaign that they used in Montana. And I think they used it in Wyoming as well, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know that if you guys have seen these advertisements or not. Messages that aroused moderate levels of fear were more effective than more extreme messages, as was discovered with the junior high audience. So it wasn't them, talking about you dying. They were talking about you becoming a prostitute, and of course that was more likely to have an impact than if they showed you a dead body or if they showed you skulls or whatever. Before the messages can be accepted, the recipient must feel that they have some degree of control over the behavior, and that's one of the reasons why they said not even once. Don't try it even once. They were trying to convince the kids that they had control over the crystal meth. And as long as they never tried it, they wouldn't have to worry about it. And of course, this is not a very attractive picture. This is also not a very attractive picture. It also has to do with sex. No one thinks that they'll lose their virginity here. Meth will change all that, of course. Having sex in a really nasty bathroom. Actually, doing meth won't make it easier to hook up because this is the message. And it's not really, it is kind of smacking you in the face, but at the same time, it's not the most severe message that they can send you. Before meth, I had a daughter. Now I have a prostitute. Another meth methods. This is Montana Meth Project, and it was funded by that billionaire who spent his fortune trying to keep people in Montana from using drugs. How many people are in Montana? Less than 1 million. I know, but he was from Kalispell, and his daughter died of a crystal meth overdose. Beating an old man for money isn't normal, but on meth it is, and of course that's part of the Montana Meth Project as well. And this was aimed at the reservations. There's 7 reservations in Montana. This one was aimed at the reservations because they hold their elders in high esteem, and for that reason, of course, attacking an elder would be anathema to these select individuals. So they're aiming a lot of these toward the reservations. This one especially toward the reservations. Anyway, okay. Occupational health psychologists are either health psychologists or industrial organizational psychologists who work to design health workplaces. Dimensions of health, healthy work, trying to control stress in the work area, improving work-family relations, violence prevention, especially in the workplace, improving relationships at work. And that would be either a health psychologist or an industrial organizational psychologist. I'm a student from Ashford who is going to go into IO, graduate school in IO at Wright State. He's studying space travel. So he's going to be working with the environments that people will be traveling in space. We're looking at a Mars mission. NASA's looking at a Mars mission. Elon Musk is looking at a Mars mission. So that's what they're talking about. That's what they're working on right now. That's what he's going to be working on. He's going to be working on the environment that they're going to fly to Mars in. Behavioral crossover effects or more frustration from the workplace are brought into the home environment. And of course, this is this frustration occurs. Negative emotion spillover occurs when a negative workplace event creates negative behavior at home. And of course, if you've ever been in a situation where something bad happened to you at work, and then you went home, of course, it was really hard to flip that switch. But that's one of the things that you have to do. You have to leave your work at work and be home when you're home. Social withdrawal occurs when a worker allows their frustrations from work to lead to their withdrawal from the family through substance abuse or emotional numbing. And of course, this is relatively common in some environments. Workplace homicides have become the second leading cause of death after occupational injuries. Let me sign you in, Sheldon.
Oh, right. Yeah,
You're here. Okay. Well, 90% are type 1 incidents caused by robberies. 10% can be attributed to violent acts of clients. That's the type 2 violence. Type 3 violence is violent acts of former or current employees. And of course, I guess, well, we really can't count the student, the former student that shot up his former high school. But if it had been a teacher, that would have been another story. Or domestic violence spilling over into the workplace. One time I was working in the hospital, and I had a lady working for me whose boyfriend, it wasn't even her husband, her boyfriend came in. She was an older lady, and he was an older man, but he was angry about something. And I'll tell you what, every other word was an F word. Fun, yeah, he wanted to have fun, I guess. Anyway, yeah, he came in and we were running we were in the hospital, of course, and we were supposed to be drawing blood, so we would get the slips downstairs, and then we'd have to go upstairs to draw the blood. And he stood in the doorway. He wouldn't get out of the doorway. He wouldn't let anybody push past him.
He stood there with his arms on the door so that nobody could get past him. And of course, we needed to go upstairs, and there was already one person upstairs. So all of a sudden, we got this person running all over the place. While we're calling the police to get this guy out of the way. And of course, he was going to kill her, and he was going to kill me, which is possible, I guess. I'm not the largest person in the world. Anyway, he's going to kill me, he's going to kill her. There were two other individuals in the office, and he was going to kill all of us. But I was going to be the first one he was going to kill, and then he was going to kill her. The other two individuals were female. So I guess he's going to take me out first. Of course, he's standing in the doorway. We couldn't get out. And of course, we called security, and security came over, and they couldn't do anything because it's a public hospital. So they had to call the police, and the police had to come over. By this time, it's 10 or 15 minutes. It was just a mess. It was quite the mess. Finally, he did come in to attack me. I was trying to get him to come in to attack me, and he finally came in to attack me. And about that time, the police showed up, and I was real happy to see the cops, because as soon as he got out of the doorway, everybody else escaped. He came at me, and about that time, the police came around the corner, and I had decided I was going to get out the door if I could get around him too, but I wasn't going to try to fight the guy. Anyway, he got arrested. He was going to kill us all. That turned out he had a gun in his back, and he had a knife. We knew he had a knife, but he hadn't drawn either one of them, so he hadn't really. His threats were only verbal at this point. Anyway, it was a domestic violence that spilled over in the workplace. Fascinating as that is. That's a type 4 workplace homicide situation. Anyway, okay, nobody died, don't worry. Worksite wellness programs are ideal for promoting health because of convenience for workers, opportunities for social support, follow through, and feedback. Successful programs are voluntary and related to behaviors of interest, including health screenings, ensure confidentiality, they have company support and are convenient, and they offer incentives for success. My brother used to work for an organization, and my brother's older than I am. This is my older brother, and they decided that they were going to promote health. So they decided they'd start a 10,000 step program. So what they wanted these people to do, they were going to give them an extra half an hour at lunch to walk, and they had a walking track around the property. So they did, and they were going to give incentives for people that walked the most, or they ran the most, or they did this, or they did that, they did the other. Well, they made the mistake of making it age-related. So my brother, who was actually older than I am, here he is. He's walking these 10,000 steps. But he gets an award like every week. He gets one of these incentives, and he thought this was just great. He started walking a lot more, lost weight. Everything was going really well until they decided that they'd already spent too much money. And my brother had won almost all the awards anyway, so it was really my brother was a cross-country runner in high school, so he's a distance guy. So he'd get out there and he'd just take off. And he'd have a great time for lunch. And he would walk through his lunch. He didn't even eat lunch. And that's probably why he lost so much weight. Anyway, it looked pretty good. That was about 15 years ago. He doesn't look good anymore, so he stopped walking. Positive psychology is a strength-based preventive approach to research and interventions. The APA began promoting positive health, mental health in the mission statement in 2001. That's when I started on my PhD in 2001. The previous approach was to react to problems after they occurred. Positive psychology, however, emphasized being proactive in preventing mental illness. So the idea was trying to prevent mental illness. I like that idea. I like that idea a lot. So I have tried to promote positive psychology in everything that I do. New terms that have appeared, have entered the APA lexicon. We started talking about comorbidity.
when there are multiple states of disease occurring simultaneously. If we diagnose somebody, we diagnose them with schizophrenia, we diagnose them with bipolar disorder, we diagnose them with borderline personality disorder, but we didn't talk about things that we didn't put things together. And so we suddenly started talking about comorbidity. The biggest problem we were having was that which one is the worst? Well, is depression worse than anxiety? That's what we would do. If we considered the depression worse, we diagnosed them with depression and didn't talk about their anxiety. We didn't deal with their anxiety. But the reality is, if somebody has depression and substance abuse, which do you treat first? Yeah. If you don't deal with their substance abuse, you're not going to be able to get to their depression. So you're going to have to deal with their substance abuse first. So we started talking about comorbidity because we had a lot of individuals out there that we weren't helping. And the reason we weren't helping them was because we weren't prioritizing what we were doing. If they had schizophrenia and substance abuse, which one did we treat first? Well, we treated the schizophrenia, of course, because it's much worse than the substance abuse. But you can't deal with the schizophrenia until you deal with substance abuse. And that was the problem. And of course, the insurance companies, when the APA changed their lexicon, the insurance companies had to start looking at the way the APA was talking. So they changed the way that they were funding the problems that we were dealing with. Flourishing and psychological capital have been used to refer to the combined effects that predict wellness in the workplace. Flourishing psychological capital has to do with the way that you feel, hope, the optimism that you feel, the fact that you feel like you can take care of just about any problem, self-efficacy, and of course resilience. What is the level of resilience that we're dealing with? One of the problems I had up on, Michelle's going, okay. One of the problems I had up at Fort Belknap was the fact that I was dealing with individuals who hadn't accepted this lexicon yet. So one of the things that I was dealing with was resilience. I was trying to show the population that there was resilience and that they could overcome any of the problems that they may potentially have, depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts. So that's what I was trying to show, but they didn't like that because they didn't think that they were going to be able to get the funding. They were afraid that they were going to lose funding if we talked about positive things rather than negative things. So they would rather talk about alcohol abuse, and they'd rather talk about sexual abuse and domestic abuse. They'd rather talk about these things because it was easier to get funding if you talked about negative things than if you talked about positive things. And for that reason, of course, I had all kinds of interesting problems up there. I'm trying to be positive and everybody else is going, oh no, look at all the alcoholism. Yeah, look at all the alcoholism, but look at the strength you have in your population. Look at we need hope. We need optimism. We need people with self-efficacy. And of course, they didn't want to talk about that because they were afraid their funding would be cut. Co-vitality refers to the positive traits of well-being, self-confidence, and general health. So we've got co-vitality, which is a positive psychology term, flourishing and psychological capital, and comorbidity. And this has changed psychology completely. If you started in psychology in 1999 or 1995 or 1990, positive psychology, we just looked at the problems people had. We didn't look at their strengths. And after 2001, we started looking at their strengths. When faced with adversity, Carver et al. In 2005 have identified 4 possible outcomes. One of the outcomes, of course, is you can keep going in the same direction you're headed right now. You can keep going down. You can keep sliding downward. Another possibility is that you'll survive with diminished capacity. In other words, if you have a heart problem, if you have a heart attack, sure, you're going to survive your heart attack, but now you can't walk across the room without having a problem. A third outcome is eventual return to the pre-adversity level of functioning, so you go back to the level you were at before. And the last possibility is resilience, where you're actually stronger after your problem than you were before your problem. Is that a possibility? Can we go through trauma and come out stronger than we were before? Is that a possibility? That's called resilience. Of course it's a possibility. And that's one of the things that I tried to show the people up north. I tried to show them that they had resilience. And that's the research I did. I did research looking at resilience. And what I showed was that they had a higher resilience level than just about everybody else in the United States, in the world. That's what I discovered. Did they like that? Oh, hell no, they didn't like it. No, they're after funding, damn it. They're not after, they don't want to feel good about themselves. Anyway. These are the 4 possibilities. Almost everybody. Let's say somebody dies in your family. As tragic as that always is, somebody dies in your family. So what do? Well, you can have any of these 4 possibilities. There's always a possibility that you'll never get over it. There's always a possibility that you'll get over it, but you're not going to be you're going to be sad for the rest of your life. There's a possibility that you'll get over it, and eventually you'll get back to the point where you were before the person died. Or somebody may die and you may get over it fairly quickly. And actually be stronger than you were before. Is that a possibility? Should death always take a chunk out of our heart? Should it always do that? Why? My brother was in a combat engineers unit. My dad was president of the Red Cross, not the president. Anyway, so my brother was off, and they got overrun by the North Vietnamese, by the NBA. They were getting overrun. They were in a base camp. My dad hadn't heard from my brother in 6 weeks. So my dad, he calls up the colonel, or he actually calls up the general. The general called up the colonel called up the major called up the captain. They said, where's PFC Brad at? And the answer was, well, he's out on this, he's out in this base camp, and they're being overrun by the NBA. And they said, go get him. We got the Red Cross. He's harassing us to get a letter back. I don't want to send him one of those your son is dead letters. So they did. They flew a helicopter in. He's being overrun. The helicopter picked up him and all the wounded and took off and took them back. And he went back there and he wrote a letter and he swore all over the place, and then he had to scratch it all out and he had to write it again without all the F words, all the fun words. And he sent it to my dad. Jumped back on the helicopter, tried to get back in, and they wouldn't take him back in. They couldn't get back in. And the reason they couldn't get back in is because they'd been overrun while he was out. Everybody was killed. Everybody in his unit was killed, except for the wounded people that survived, that were taken out with him. And of course, that helicopter probably wouldn't have come in, and they wouldn't have survived if they hadn't come in to get him, because it was the general's helicopter. I know. Now, how many chunks of his heart have to be gone for all those people?
Is that survivor's guilt?
I don't think so. We don't do that. We don't play survivor's guilt. That's kind of destructive. It's self-destructive. His whole heart should be gone. His whole unit was wiped out. These are all of his friends. I know, you got to be tough. You got to be resilient. You got to handle this kind of stuff. If it bothered me every time one of my patients died, my goodness gracious, I'd be a dead man. I'd be in bad shape. It's not that I don't care. It's that I can't afford to lose that much of my heart, you know? And I tried, I worked as hard as I possibly could to save their lives. I did everything that I could. I gave them my entire being. But once they died, that was it. I had to move on. I had to move on to the next patient. Anyway.
That's how it's complicated for the cancers here on the reservation of dealing with students that are at risk.
Mhm.
There's a couple of relatives that are in that field.
Uh-huh.
Some of them did bounce back, some of them didn't. Some of them ended up doing it themselves.
We see that all the time. And that's not resilience.
So do they teach that to you in
No.
the graduate program, saying that if you experience this rotation in school,
The only place you're gonna hear it is right here,
Bradley,
That's it. Write that down.
there we go.
Bradway told me to be a cold-hearted son of a SOB. Just write down SOB and you'll remember the B stands for Bradway. Yeah. No, otherwise you're only going to be in the field for a really short period of time. You know? And I worry about this stuff about you guys. I really do. Because some of you seem really sensitive to this kind of stuff.
Can you tell?
Yeah.
Tara?
Uh,
Tara.
she seems, I don't know.
I think Edison would throw a party out there. You gotta listen to that.
Well, that's what I'm trying to teach you.
Oh my god.
When
Is that one less case to worry about?
there you go, there we go. Oh, man, I'm glad that one died instead of the third. That's the way to use it.
Just these numbers.
Who's in room 4? Room 4 just died. Okay. Okay, we'll send him up to the board, call Bradway up and take him down with his gurney. Damn. Pilots. Pilots are not very nice people anyway. But when a pilot dies in a airplane crash, what do they do that night? You know, many of you guys have been in the service. They have a party. They celebrate the fact they're not dead. You think I'm kidding? They have a big party. It's like a wake. Yeah. Nobody cries. If you cry, you can't fly the next day. And who knows, you may have to fly the next day. This happened, my wife was stationed in Korea. They had an F-16 that was taken off and an F-15 that was landing. And they got mixed up and the one was taken off and the other one was landing and they landed right on top of the one that was taken off. Boom. The guy on top didn't die, but the guys underneath, they died. The F-15 crew died. There were only 2 of them. So what happened that night? Big party. Huge party. Everybody got killed. They didn't fly as many sorties the next day because there were a lot of people that were too inebriated to fly. But I mean, you can't let it get to you. Otherwise, you can't function. And their job is to fly. So you can't let it get to you. You got to just discard it. And that's the way it works. And that's the way it is. Sorry about that. Okay, you got to be tough, okay? You've got to be resilient. They've got to be resilient, and you've got to be resilient. Thriving is the paradoxical resilience outcome in which adversity leads to greater psychological and or physical well-being. Thriving occurs when the system breaks down and then is rebuilt stronger through exercise. And this is known as psychological bodybuilding. Of course, it's not really physical bodybuilding, but it's psychological bodybuilding. If you come back stronger, that's resilience, that's thriving. And of course, we've got another example of physical thriving, but not psychological thriving. Anabolism is cellular activity that builds the body. Catabolism is cellular activity that breaks down tissue to provide energy. So if you haven't eaten for a couple days, and you have to go out and run a mile or whatever you have to do, you have to keep going. You haven't eaten, so you don't have those energy stores. So what's your body going to be? to do. It's going to break down your protein. It's going to break down your muscle mass. It's going to start eating your muscle mass just for your survival. And this is known as catabolism. So when you break it down, when you break down your muscle, if you don't eat, and of course, when I went through my divorce, this is exactly what happened. I went down from 145 pounds to 117 pounds, not thinking that this was going to happen to me because I was eating. That wasn't the problem. But the stress was so great that I started losing weight. And this is one of the things that we have to watch for. This is one of the things we have to be careful of when somebody has a relationship breakup. You've got to make sure that they don't become anorexic. Because catabolism will start taking place. I went down to 117 pounds. That was ugly. I'm an ugly 117 pounder, okay? I looked really skinny. You could see all my joints. You could see all my bones. You could see my clavicle. You know, I didn't have any fat on my body at all. Catabolic metabolism takes place for quick energy during times of stress, when catecholamines and cortisol trigger the system to provide energy for the fight or flight response. And of course, this was going on a continual basis because my relationship was breaking up. Catabolic metabolism can be reversed through the release of anabolic hormones like human growth hormone or insulin-like growth factor and the sex steroid, so it increases your testosterone level. So another problem that we have when an individual is going through a relationship problem, they will have a higher HGH level, they'll have a higher insulin-like growth factor, but they'll also have a higher testosterone level, depending on the situation. And because of this, they're more likely to be aggressive. And so that's another problem that we see in relationship breakups. Physical thriving is a fluid allostatic system which flexibly shifts between high and low levels of sympathetic nervous system arousal depending on the needs of the environment, and that is physical thriving. Allostatic overload results in long-term elevations in catabolic hormones, which looks a great deal like accelerated aging. And of course, these are the presidents of the United States. This is Obama after 8 years in office. As you can see, he looks a lot older than he did when he first came into office. George W. Bush, 8 years later, looks like he has aged a ton. Bill Clinton, the same thing. He actually had a heart attack in 2002. Potentially it's from some of the crap that the poor guy went through. Of course, Abraham Lincoln was only president for 5 years, but as you can see, he looks like he's about ready to die, and he was ready to die. He was assassinated right after that. Accelerated aging, other problems that these individuals potentially will have, hypertension, wasted muscles, wasted muscles. I don't know. Obama was pretty good at exercising. He played a lot of basketball. Ulcers, of course, fatigue, increased risk of chronic diseases, and that's what happened with Bill Clinton. He may have been a Marfan. He may have had Marfan syndrome. Yeah. He had elongated hands, elongated face. He was 6'5". I think he was the tallest president, if I'm not mistaken. There's Barack Obama just before he left office. As you can see, his hair's turned white. He looked pretty good before when he was elected president. He looked like a kid. But then when he left office, we knew he wasn't a kid anymore. That's for darn sure. Research by Wise et al. In 1975 showed that when stressors are introduced, but the individual is given ample time to recover from the stressors, the intermittent stressors actually make the individual psychologically and physiologically tougher. And of course, this is what they're talking about. Failure is not falling down, but refusing to get up, and that's a Chinese proverb, and that has to do with stressors. Resilience is the capacity of the body and the brain to withstand challenges to homeostasis. The brain is the certain organ of adaptation, since it determines the danger of the stressor and then develops a strategy for dealing with the stressor. So resilience starts in your head, starts in your brain. You need to decide how you're going to react to this. I'd never gotten a divorce before. So after my first divorce, I wasn't exactly sure how to do it. The next time I got married and got a divorce, I handled it much, much better. I only went down to 119 pounds. I know, relationships. Every time you get married forever. So every time one of them ends, that's a forever that you've lived. It's really hard. Well beyond my comprehension. That's how I survived any of that stuff. So the brain is the first area that you have to deal with. When you're in a military situation, of course, military situations are extreme, but your survival starts right up here. It isn't seeing the enemy and knowing where the enemy is. It's understanding how you're going to react to what's going on. What's going to happen next? I made the mistake of watching a horror movie last night. And it's the dumbest thing I've ever done. And here's this medic, he's taking care of this guy, and there's bullets whizzing all over the place, and he's just concentrating on keeping this guy alive. And the one guy that survived the whole mess was the medic. Mainly because he was in the middle of everybody else, and they had a lot of other people to shoot at, but also he didn't overreact to anything. He didn't try to hide. They were overrun at one point, and everybody was trying to protect him, which was really kind of interesting. I didn't watch very much of it, but every time I turned it on, there was the medic again. He was taking care of this guy. Really kind of bizarre. So it all starts right here. What's going to happen to you? The military is really tough because the military, they send you from one place to another place, and then you have to go to another place, and everybody wants you to act just like them. I think I've talked about this before. How many do you want to?
6 minutes.
About 6 minutes, right? Yeah. Everybody wants you to act like them. So when you go to Montana, people want you to act like somebody from Montana. You have to wear a Montana hat. I know. Is there a Montana hat? Yes, there's a Montana cowboy hat. Everybody knows that. And they want you to act like somebody from Montana. When you go to Mississippi, they want you to act like somebody from Mississippi. When you go to Oklahoma, they want you to act like somebody from Oklahoma. So everybody's trying to get you to act like them. But the reality is, this is yourself. You've got to be yourself. You can't start being this malleable person and start acting like somebody from New York just because you live in New York. You got to know who you are, and that's where it starts. And if you figure out who you are before you come into these situations, then potentially you'll figure out how to adapt. This is how people from where I live. That's the way natives. That's the way Navajos survive in a military environment. They maintain who they are. They know who they are. They never stop being Navajo. They never stop being Sioux. They never stop being whoever they are. They know who they are. And they're able to maintain this. Does that make sense? Sure. Of course. And they think about who they are the entire time they're in the service. The brain is the central organ of adaptation since it determines the danger of the stressors. It also regulates the automatic and voluntary responses to the stressor. Overuse or dysregulation can lead to allostatic overload and the development of diseases of adaptation. And of course, you certainly don't want to do that. But I've seen that. I've seen that in individuals that tried to be malleable, that tried to change with wherever they were. They didn't know who they were. So when they're in Texas, they acted like a Texan. Well, how do Texans act? Well, for one thing, they wear cowboy boots. They wear cowboy boots and they wear cowboy hats. As stupid as that sounds, what does that have to do with being from Texas? I don't know. But you put on, if you're from Indiana or Ohio and you start putting on cowboy boots and cowboy hats, then you've lost your identity. You don't know who the hell you are. And I watched this over and over again. And guess what happened next? They started catching colds. Then all of a sudden they had pneumonia. If the flu came around, they caught it. And then, of course, they had a heart attack or something else happened to them. Their kidneys shut down. All kinds of interesting things would happen. So one of the things that you need to do is you need to know who you are, and you need to maintain that person that you are. Not everyone reacts the same to stressors. While some people overreact to stressors, others are able to modulate their responses. Now, you guys are really lucky because you know who you are. You're told this every day. When you go home, your parents and your grandparents are telling you who you are. But I wasn't so lucky. People didn't tell me who I was. I'm from Indiana. I knew that. I'm a Hoosier. I got this really stupid looking blue flag with this torch in the middle. Yeah, with 11 stars or something. As stupid as that is. That's me. No, 19 stars. So that's 19. That's me. But they didn't tell me how I was supposed to act. They didn't tell me whether I was supposed to change. My brother changed. My brother joined the military. He changed. He wasn't the same person he was when he left. He wasn't a Hoosier anymore. He started acting like the people that he was around. And now he smokes. And I'll bet you guys before he's my baby. He's 5 years younger than I am, but I bet he dies before I do. He does. There's a lot of it. But then again, I look really young.
How do you exercise?
He doesn't exercise. He smokes. He's got spinal. He's got a spinal problem. His spine is shrinking.
He's probably at the weight room right now.
He can't lift. Yeah, he uses a cane. Walks around with a cane. Yeah, he's a mess. And he smokes dumb shit. Oh, did I say shit? I'm sorry. He's my brother. I can call him a dumb shit if I want to. Okay, what are we doing? Well, some people overreact to stressors. Others are able to modulate their responses. Researchers have found that individuals raised in a nurturing environment are better able to handle frequent minor stressors than people raised in a non-nurturing, stress-free environment. Why don't we stop right here? One of the things we're going to discover is DHEA is something really positive. If we give our soldiers DHEA, they have less of a response to stress of one kind or another. And guess who takes DHEA every day? I figured this one out a long time ago. This is brand new because they've been saying that DHEA doesn't do anything for you, and I've been taking it for probably 20 years. So that's the reason I'm in much better shape than my brother is. Anyway, let's stop right here. We'll pick this up next time with DHEA.